Oi, oi, it's your boy, Slacky J, coming at you on a Wednesday, last day of August, in what will be probably the only podcast of the week, because I'm working on this Alex Pereira stuff, which is what I was working on in the latter half of last week as well. Having a lot of fun with it, got a bit carried away, but that's the joy of being independent. I can work on the things that excite me, rather than doing a boycast about like the upcoming one event that it turns out almost nobody is able to watch. Well, I think in the US you were all right. In the US it was on Amazon Prime. I booted up Amazon Prime. Not available for me in the fucking UK. And I heard from a lot of people in other countries that they had the same level of trouble watching it. In fact, the one YouTube comment section, I had a bit of a crisis of confidence, because I was almost convinced that when you go on one live event and there's just billions of people pounding in the chat about how much they love Stamp Airtex and shit like that, I just assumed that a vast majority of them were bots, because one hides the view counts while claiming that billions of people watch their product, like Elvis in Hawaii. But then I went on one's recent videos looking for some of these fights again before I found ways of watching them. And the comments, all the top comments are like, well, good luck, one, you're going to need it. You shouldn't have made your product unavailable to, a huge portion of your viewership, which was crazy, because I assumed that everyone who commented on one and was a big one stan wasn't real. Or they'd continue commenting things like, Brave New World, can't wait to watch one on Amazon Prime / on pay-per-view if you don't live in the US. So that was really interesting. Some of my time was spent trying to find ways to watch one. And then, of course, we had the Contender Series last night, which was only really remarkable for the fact that Gianni the Greek is on a 2-16 run of bets. And these aren't, complex bets like bet on the third round knockout or something like that. These are simple win-loss bets. Who's going to win, who's going to lose, or rather just who's going to win. And in fact, this week he managed the rare reverse sweep, betted on all the wrong people. Am I shitting on him because I think I could do a better job? Probably not. I think I've said plenty of times before, betting on MMA is just wild, because there's so many ways to immediately lose a fight. You can't be up 2 touchdowns in a game of American football in the last minute and lose it. Whereas in MMA, a guy can be winning for all the reasons you predicted and then get smoked. But I think the thing about it is that the Contender Series is so heavily marketed at degenerate gamblers, and they have Gianni in there basically pretending that looking at stats is the same as looking at film, which it just isn't in fights. Stats in team games I would consider more reliable, and games where guys can play, 2-3 dozen matches a year. Stats don't help you when it's someone who's had 6 pro fights against someone who's had 8 pro fights, and they've all been against varying levels of competition. So it is funny that that's just, completely useless. But the people who watch the Contender Series religiously won't care, because they mainly have gambling problems, or Composer watches it because Composer watches everything, or they are so hardcore that they don't mind watching really bad fights generally. So we're going to talk about one, we're going to talk about the Contender Series, and we're going to talk about the upcoming UFC card in France, Paris, France. No, Paris, Texas, or Paris, Oklahoma. Yeah, Paris. We're going to Paris for a UFC event, and they're taking Ciryl Gane, and they're taking Tuivasa as well. Great story came out about that yesterday. Tuivasa is paying for his own airfare from Australia to Paris, because he wanted to go either business or first. And I mean, first would be a bit much, but business. I mean, if the company can't pay for that when he's a 270-pound man flying 24 hours. I've done Australia to England, and that is a full day in a seat. Fucking miserable. I can only imagine for gigantic people, it's even more miserable. Which is even funnier when you've got Molly McCann saying, like, oh, they pay for all my travel and stuff. You're going, what's your travel? They sent you to Vegas flying economy class, or coach, as they call it in America. Economy premium, so you get 2 inches of extra legroom. She's probably loaded up her bag with all the teeny tiny bottles of spirits that they give you. But yeah, just mad. I mean, I said it on Twitter, but I've said it 100 times before on this podcast at this point, and it all links into the Contender Series stuff. But I feel like the UFC, we're in a stage where they've given up on world fucking domination, and they're now focusing on cutting costs. Bringing in people who are happy for 10 and 10, just thrilled to be there. Young, impressionable, talented idiots. And anything that could be considered like an extra cost is just going to be thrown by the wayside. Because what could it possibly be more to get Tai Tuivasa to Paris for in business? They could recoup that on like 3 sales of NFTs to fucking idiots. Or take it straight out of the YouTube earnings of a video of Tai doing a shoey at one of their events. But anyway, let's talk one. That was on this weekend. There were two cards. Firstly, they've started numbering them. So 160, which is weird to say, was Christian Lee versus Ok. Is it Ok? What are we calling him? Okay. Mid. Just call him Mid. Christian Lee is Mid too. That was an okay card. And then you had one on Prime 1, which was also an okay card. Headlined by Demetrious Johnson versus, I was about to say Marlon Moraes, Adriano Moraes in the rematch of their first shocking fight where Moraes knocked him out. A lot of this was carried by the 4-ounce Muay Thai, which is awesome. And there was actually some interesting news that one is going to be, or Chatri has got the license to promote at Lumpini Stadium, which is really interesting. But from what I've been hearing, shit's all gone tits up at Lumpini. They keep trying to do new things with it. We're supposed to be hosting MMA fights there. They were supposed to be cutting down on gambling there, which would be really weird because gambling is so closely linked to Muay Thai. Whenever you hear someone say the Muay Thai style is to start slowly, that's to do with tradition and gambling in arenas. There is nothing that says like Muay Thai fighters, when they're fighting abroad or when they're fighting not in the stadiums, should start slow. There was a genius on Twitter the other day insisting that everyone was stupid for being surprised how little Marlon Vera did in the Dominic Cruz fight up to the stoppage because he's a Muay Thai fighter and they always start slow. It's like textbook Muay Thai. Like you're in the gym training to fight slow. Just ignore that his head coach is begging him to do more between rounds. You know who's a really famous Muay Thai fighter? Tyron Woodley. Oh, he's the most Muay Thai of all. Anyway, so the first card, what was good on it? Amir Khan got knocked out, which was sad. I like Amir Khan. Fun, explosive, fun striker. He landed a beautiful up elbow. One of many that landed in these events on this lad, Keanu? Yeah, Keanu Subba. Subba? I barely know her. And he dropped him early, stunned him. And Amir Khan, is one of the endearing things about him is that he's got quite severe, I don't know if it's Tourette's, but he's got a quite severe tic where he basically turns his head, which has got to be tricky in a sport where you're trying to keep your eyes on the guy the entire time. But Keanu Subba hit him with they came together and he hit him with a very short right hand that didn't look like it did anything, and a big booming left hook came over afterwards. But if you were watching closely, the right hand connected right on the chin, and the left hook swung over his head. And Amir Khan was stumbled by the right hand, went back to the fence. You know, we're always talking about fighting hurt. It's one of those things where some guys are really good at fighting hurt, like Robert Whittaker against Yoel Romero. In and out, smothering the guy, running away, back foot to the fence and teep him as he comes in, close off some elbows and clinch up. You know, there's a lot of things you can do when you're hurt, and you can watch people and go, damn, that's really good fighting when you're hurt. But I mean, it all depends on how much you're hurt. Like, if you get really badly dinged, you can't think about anything. And it's very hard to poker face if you just immediately back onto the fence and stop throwing things. So Keanu Subba just went mental and knocked him down with the right hand, got the finish. Big win for him because Amir Khan's pretty good and been a name in one for a while. There was this great 4-ounce Muay Thai fight between Sam Pech and Ritawada. And I thought Ritawada looked absolutely banging in the first round of this, doing great work with his kicks and his jab. And one of the things that I really like about 4-ounce Muay Thai is that the jab seems to be more of a weapon. There's always been a big connection between boxing and Muay Thai anyway. A lot of Muay Thai fighters have gone to boxing to make more money. a lot of world champions in the lower weight classes and Olympic representatives have come from Muay Thai. In Thailand, this is. But in Muay Thai, you see a lot of hand fighting, which is something that you don't see that much in boxing, because if you're using both your hands to tie up both of your opponent's hands, that's cool. But what are you doing to score points? Because both your hands are tied up, tying their hands up. So you see it more in Muay Thai when you can turn over elbows, you can step in with knees. You can kick the legs from quite close range when you're touching the opponent's hands. But there's a trade-off. 4-ounce gloves, you can use your thumb, which is nice, so you can grip the wrists, which you've seen some guys do a lot when their opponent really covers up tight. You can grip the wrists and basically hold them to their head or pull them down. Overeem versus Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, enormously strong man, but Overeem just grabs him by the wrists. Like he's Jimmy Stewart shaking a woman in one of those 1950s films. What are you doing, woman? But in the big gloves, obviously, you've got more surface area to obstruct the opponent's hands if they're throwing punches at you. So you can take a lot of stank off their blows. So the 4-ounce gloves seem to, from my, there's not been an awful lot of 4-ounce Muay Thai. It's been a couple of years, tops. I mean, John Wayne Parr did some, but one's been doing it for, is it 4 or 5 years? I don't know. But so we don't have a huge amount of stuff to draw from, but I have noticed that the jab seems to sneak through a lot more easily in 4-ounce Muay Thai. For fighters that I've seen, I've gone back and watched some of their arena fights in big gloves, and they haven't jabbed nearly as actively or certainly accurately. So Riddiwada was looking great. And another one that you saw all weekend was teeps to the lead leg, which is, pretty common in Muay Thai, but it's quite interesting because in MMA, there was this thing where when the oblique kicks came in and low line side kicks, that's disgusting. They don't do that in Muay Thai. And you go, no, they do it all the time. They're just standing in shorter stances, so their legs very rarely straighten out and get jammed, and their hips are really thrown back by it. But they're constantly poking each other in the thigh with straight kicks. So the first round was all Riddiwada, and then second round, Samapatch comes out, backs up to the fence. Riddiwada's about to step in on him, and he just cross-traps the lead hand, pitches this enormous... They're both southpaws, so he cross-traps the lead hand, pitches this enormous left hand over the top, and sparks him. And it was something that I watched a couple of fights for... I was talking about Tanagawa the other day. A guy who is not a very good boxer in kickboxing. He's a cruiserweight. But he does do a very good job of raising the lead arm to guard his head and then pressing in on the opponent so that it's very hard for them to land clean blows. And his problems have come... There's what's his name? He's been knocked out 3 times by the same guy because he keeps trying to lean back and throw counter left hooks and gets banged on the chin with the right hand that wouldn't have hit if he was just doing the thing that he normally does. But yeah, he gets his hand stripped, Riddiwada, in this one, and he immediately leans back and tries to throw a big leaning lead hook, which was basically compounding the bad situation where his arm had been torn away from his guard. Amazing knockout. Definitely go watch that one. The co-main event was Tang Kai versus Tan Lee. Tan Lee, you'll remember for beating Martin Nguyen, knocked him out. Very impressive. Then he fought Gary Tonin. Had been working with Ryan Hall at 50-50 in... Is that Virginia or West Virginia? But yeah, he was unwinding Tonin's leg attacks and punching him in the face in between, and he landed a good one and knocked him out. But it was very interesting because he's known as a taekwondo guy. He's got a very long stance. He has some fun kicks, but mainly does his work with his hands from my experience of watching him. And he didn't have any answers for Tang Kai just kicking his leg. Tang Kai would do a little bounce in, a little bounce out, and then after bouncing out, he'd just scoot in fast as you like with a hard low kick. Sometimes inside on the thigh, sometimes on the calf. He's often taken Thunley off his feet. And the rest of the match was pretty evenly fought. They were both doing okay with their hands, but Thunley couldn't kick as much or wouldn't kick as much, and was forced to sort of change stances and overreact to a lot of these kicks because he got to defending them too late. I mean, it wasn't a barn burner by any means, but they were hyping up how this would be Tang Kai becoming the first male fighter to win a major mixed martial arts title. And I don't think you can argue against that. It's good. It's there's 1 billion people in China, and it has a rich martial arts history. I mean, it's got a rich martial arts history of guys who do a kickboxing style that has takedowns. So, the more interested we can get young Chinese people in mixed martial arts, the better for the sport, ultimately. And your main event was Christian Lee versus Ok Rayun, a rematch of their controversial 5-round decision where the Lee siblings were just fuming over how this very close fight could be scored for Ok. You're like, it was a close fight. Shut up. Christian Lee's tantrum after that first fight is one of the great... I mean, I watched Anthony Joshua's the other weekend, and Christian Lee's was better. He just gets on the mic and he goes, I have enormous respect for Ok Rayun, but that's bullshit. He's like, I want to thank the 500 fans in attendance because it was in the middle of COVID. And they're all like, yay! And then he just immediately goes, that was bullshit. We're taking it to the board. I want it overturned. Not even, I want a rematch. Just, I want it overturned. That makes you look bitch-made, especially if your dad is heavily involved in the running of one, allegedly. But this one, Christian Lee looked great. He walked him down. He was hitting him with overhands. He was hitting him with left hooks. Og kept circling towards the left hook and then getting caught with it, which was very silly. But there was a lovely right high kick he dropped Ok with. You know, Ok's boxing has been surprising sometimes, but I thought he looked very, channeling my Pat Wyman, rote here. He was just pumping the 1-2 and then going back into like a defensive mode with his head still up and his hands still down. So Christian Lee was just lumping him up. Knocks him down in the second round, runs in and tries to knee him in the head with his right knee, hits him, and then he misses his left knee and kicks him in the neck, which is absolutely the sort of thing that one would overturn if it happened to one of the Lee siblings. But yeah, I mean, it was good. Christian Lee is always exciting. I do like that about him. As much as I love making fun of the nepotism and the fact that Angela and Christian both love cheating. You know, I'm going to give Victoria, the young one, a shout out because I think she's had 2 fights. When I've seen her, no cheating. Both the other Lees fucking love cheating. But it'd be interesting to see him in with the other talent around the world. Unfortunately, one has a policy where they'd cross-promote with the UFC, but they wouldn't with Rising or Bellator. You know, the two that you could actually cross-promote with. But Christian Lee, I would probably pick him to stop Patricky Pitbull, as I do with most people who are competent in the lightweight class. Though their lightweight is 170, so not even 165. So it is a weird middle class. It's more like the 165 class that people always say they want when Rafael dos Anjos loses a fight. Actually, this brings us on to one on Prime Video 1, Moraes versus Johnson 2. Lots of numbers in that title. But they did their hydration testing and whatnot, and I think half the fighters failed. So they were tested for hydration and were dehydrated. And there was, I spoke to some people on Reddit about this, and I was saying that, you know, the thing that is suspect about it is that, you know, I got some weird one defenders. There's a guy who is the teep to the junk of one, who only ever comments on one thread. But some people were like, oh, well, if you get dehydrated, you drink some water, and then you're hydrated again. That's what it's about. But the thing is that they don't let you weigh in if you're dehydrated, if you fail the hydration testing, which makes sense. But then some of them on 1X and on this one were able to weigh in while dehydrated, and then were told they had to do the hydration testing and weigh in again. And the second one happened behind closed doors, which is weird. But then their own commission, their broadcast weigh-ins and hydration testing are literally just someone waggling around a bottle of what could be piss, could be something else, and pretending to test it or actually testing it. No one knows because they don't have a commission. But this one, Adriano Moraes missed weight and hydration, then became more hydrated and weighed in lower. Which obviously, you know, if you know any of the facts about like burning fat or muscle, you're not going to do that in a couple of hours. So he did, you know, literally the impossible. Which leads us all back to the fact that one's hydration testing is a great idea for solving the problem of weight cutting. One themselves are probably not doing it. They're probably not applying it evenly and fairly, is what I'm going to say. Because they almost lost their main event. They almost lost Demetrious Johnson on their big America card. Or their big Amazon Prime in America card. And for all the Demetrious Johnson is not a draw, he is certainly a draw if you are a smaller company trying to sell stuff in America. People are not tuning in for Nongo, in spite of him being one of the most exciting fighters in the world. In Muay Thai, a sport that no one follows. So it was wild watching everyone fail their hydration testing, but some guys really lost out. Like Savas Michael had been training for Rodtang the entire time, orthodox pressure fighter, and ends up fighting sneaky southpaw Panpayak and getting starched. So really hard for him. But I mean, he did accept the fight, but then also wants to get paid. But the good stuff from this card: Sebastian Kadestam, who is a guy I've got a complex relationship with because he's not very good, but he also has moments of really inspired violence. It's like when Matt Brown was on. He just channeled something from the God of War. Just Mars. He embodied him for a moment. And you go, oh, damn, Matt Brown. You're really technically good in a way that's super violent. And then he'd have other fights when he wasn't. But Kadestam has a bit of that. Like who was it? Was it against Sapo? Luis Sapo? But he threw flying knee into knee cut pass, knocked the guy out while passing his guard, and then kneed him a load in the head afterwards. But then he'll just lose to absolute bums, like Ben Askren. He'll just lose to random guys. So he was on a 2-fight losing streak in this one. He's opening the card, having been their welterweight champion at one point against Yuri Lepicus, who again isn't bad. But he backed Lepicus up to the fence, saw him dipping on the jab, and said, "Guess who's going to jail, motherfucker?" Hits him with the right uppercut, which the likes of which you may not see again. The sound, the thud, was startling, and Lepicus fell one way, and Kadestam walked off the other. It was absolutely gorgeous. And it happened in under a minute, so you can go watch that one on YouTube. It's fantastic. Anything else good on there? Itsuki Hirata, who's important for one's thirsty posting on YouTube. Yeah, not going to lie, good-looking lass. But good stuff. Oh, Superlek versus Walter Goncalves. Goncalves is a weird sort of herky-jerky fighter, runs around the cage a lot. But he finished his last one with some lovely body shots. But Superlek timed him coming in with an up elbow square in the face that you could, blink and you miss it, but I was watching with my eyes open and I missed it, and I had to go back and watch it. Just a beautiful application of the up elbow. Again, a few of them on these cards, but go watch that. Superlek, monster. Anything else good? Buchecha tripped on a takedown and fell underneath the guy, but pulled an Ashirami and heel hooked him. Not super impressive given who he was fighting and who he is. But I watched his post-fight interview and I was blubbing. He's really emotional because his friend, Leandro Lo, was just shot in the head, a couple of weeks ago in a really just senseless act of violence. I can't remember whether we covered that on the Boycast or on the main pod. I think that was on the Boycast. But yeah, Leandro Lo was in a club. Someone came over and stole a bottle from their table. He went and got it back from the guy because he's a BJJ world champion and he could hold people down without hurting them pretty well, I'm confident. And then he stood up and walked back to his table with the bottle, and the guy shot him in the back of the head because he was a cop off duty and he took a gun into a club like an absolute cunt. Very sad, very influential guy in the grappling scene. You can go and read more about it. It's really just tragic. But he was Buchecha's friend and training partner for years and years. So Buchecha was very emotional about that. And then Mitch Chilson chimed in with, "Well, you're getting $50,000 from Chatri Sitchot Dog." And he remembered, oh yeah, this is still MMA. It's the gaudiest shit in the world. Any real moment is going to be quickly undercut by, "Hail Caesar, he's giving us nice things for finishing people." Panpayak versus Savas Michael was just incredible. Last time I saw Savas Michael was, I think, the first time I saw Savas Michael, and I was like, damn, this kid's good. And Panpayak just dismantled him. Beautiful. Jabbed in on a kick, and then hit him with a right hook as his foot was going back. Knocked him out with the right hook, and then Borod Savas Michael fell unconscious into a high kick in the face. Reminded me of that Melvin Manhoef one back in the day, where he knocks a guy out with the overhand, hits him with a liver shot as he's falling, and then low kicks him on the end of the combo and just spins basically ragdolls him, like ragdoll physics from Hitman 2, just flies across the ring. Nongo versus Liam Harrison was sad because Liam Harrison has had a very long career in Muay Thai. He was a Muay Thai pioneer from the UK, and he's never really gotten to the toppest of the top level. He's been able to fight some very elite fighters, but often comes up on the losing end. And this was like his big chance to win a world title, effectively, against the best guy in the world at that weight. And Nongo is just a machine of destruction. He's incredible. The run he's on, unbelievable. You watched him uppercut that guy and knock his head back like a Pez dispenser. Was that his last one or the one before? Knocked out Rodlek in the third round. He's just having a great time in one. And the weirdest thing is that all he seems to want is for Chatri to like him. And Chatri keeps coming in and just slinging the belt over his shoulder and walking off in disgust. I keep asking people, so what happened between them? I don't understand why the most... he's not going to be able to speak in English and stuff, but what he does in the cage is incredibly marketable. And Chatri just seems angry every time he wins. It's so funny. Like he just throws the belt over Nongo's shoulder and walks off, and Nongo's trying to hug him every time this happens. But this fight was crazy because we talked about it before, but people pretend that because calf kick knockouts are not super common in kickboxing and Muay Thai, people pretend that if you are a good kickboxer, you cannot be calf kicked. And I said it before, but in Japanese kickboxing, there are guys coming out now saying they should ban the calf kick because it's so annoying. It's becoming more popular in J-kick. And in Muay Thai, Nongo here finished a very, very experienced both Muay Thai and a guy known for his low kicks and dealing with low kicks in Liam Harrison with calf kicks inside a round. And he didn't do it by hammering his lead leg while it was on the floor like you would in MMA, which is why it's so common in MMA, by the way, because the lead leg is out there. If you did a boxing match against someone and then you were just allowed to kick all of a sudden, you'd probably kick the calf based on the way they're standing. But what Nongo was doing was he'd get off slightly to the right side, throw in the kick and hit him as he was checking. He'd hit the back of the calf as he was checking, which is really interesting because there was a clip someone shared with me of Liam Harrison on a podcast with a load of other Nakmuay, British Nakmuay, talking about calf kicks in MMA. And it was really interesting because one of them was like, I would never throw a calf kick because everything below the thigh is bone and I could really hurt myself. There was another one who just, like, he said, he was talking about when he stopped doing amateur fights, when he turned 16 and they stopped doing fights with shin pads. He said the first low kick he threw, he realized, oh no, I've got to aim now. But it was interesting because Liam Harrison was saying, yeah, I would use the calf kick. And I did actually use it against, can't remember who it was. It might have been Rodlek. He was talking about someone that he'd used it against, an experienced Thai. And he said what he was trying to do was catch him when he was checking. He'd try and step round the side and kick him in the back of the calf because when you raise the leg, the calf is there. And it's very interesting that Nongo got him basically the same way, finished him. I'm just saying that it went sort of the dumb way. When people talk about calf kicks and things, and them not being common in Muay Thai and kickboxing, they treat it like striking is a levels thing, and once you get to a level, things don't work on you. And that's not the case. You are all to stop things working on you. You have to make reactions. You have to do things, and then that opens up other things. There are trade-offs for all movements. Nothing's for free. It's more a case that the calf kick is generally less available when guys are ready, when they're light on their lead leg anyway, or when they're a shorter stance, and you can do things to make the calf kick more available. It's just very available in MMA at the moment. So then your main event was Demetrious Johnson versus Adriano Moraes. This fight was a bit of a banger, I thought. Mad respect to DJ for getting the win back. I'm just going to say, so funny, because every time it comes up with the hydration testing, I'm like, just to remind you, Demetrious Johnson's coach is in charge of all this. And then people go, what, really? That sounds like a massive conflict of interest. And then other freaks will chime in and be like, Matt Hume's role in one is purely ceremonial. I don't even think he's there anymore. And I don't even think DJ trains with him anymore. There's just all these excuses come together. And then DJ, after this fight, said, me and Matt Hume are working on that for months. And during this fight, you can pause it in the whatever round when Moraes is on top of DJ in the guard. And Matt Hume and Chatri are sat shoulder to shoulder looking at a screen in the background with no one else around them. So he's still some sort of important part of one. He's sitting next to the guy who can overturn results on a whim and talking to him the whole fight, which is, that seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest. But Demetrious Johnson, I thought he really did the smart thing for this one. You know, during his UFC run, you got to see him adapt to opponents who he'd already beaten. I mean, was it Joey B he had the draw with? Or the very close decision? But, you know, and John Dodson he fought twice too, but you could see him adapt to people he'd already beaten and better his style after that. So I didn't have any doubt that he'd have done work for Moraes off the loss. I think if they fought again, had Demetrious Johnson won the first one and they booked the rematch, I think Demetrious Johnson would still have gone. You know, because him and Matt Hume is a terrific coach, by the way. Me making fun of his bizarre conflict of interest and the whole shadiness of one does not undermine the fact that I think he's a terrific coach. He's done amazing things. Even before Demetrious Johnson came along, big part of Rich Franklin's career, which is why Rich Franklin is also part of one. But he basically turned around Hayato Sakurai's career. If you're not familiar with Hayato Sakurai, look him up. One of my favourite fighters from back in the day. Had a whole career before Pride became a thing, or before Pride brought in lightweights, and then turned up as an old man in Pride, having made his cut to lightweight proper for the first time. People were like, who the fuck is, you know, he's probably washed. And he'd been working with Matt Hume and he looked incredible. And he kept that up for years. He was like almost 40, propping up Japanese shows like Yaranoka, just boxing up young Japanese talents. So anyway, Demetrious Johnson made some interesting adjustments for this fight. He's very interesting on the feet because when he throws his punches, his feet often come together, like underneath him, and he often does what in Olympic weightlifting is called head whip, where when you're doing the big exerting movement of cleaning the bar up to your shoulders, you throw your head back with your chin up in the air. And if you watch Demetrious Johnson when he's fighting on the feet, he does do that, which is weird because he also then moves his head after his punches and does good defensive things, or good preemptive defensive things, with this really weird, bad defensive habit attached to it. But he also has a really good chin, so it doesn't really matter that much. It's just, you know, it's odd because so much of the discourse around Demetrious Johnson for years was Joe Rogan saying he does everything perfect technically. And from a mechanics point of view, a lot of his punches are very weird because his head, you know, his chin's going up in the air and he's looking back at the ceiling. But the things that he does on the feet, tactically, technically, you know, it's something that I've learned to say in recent years, mechanically. Because the mechanics of a move are often what people are talking about when they say perfect technique or brilliant striker. And you can have flawed mechanics and be a great technical striker by use of tactics and having great discipline and instincts and making the right moves. And you can be a great mechanical striker, have beautiful technique, look fantastic on the pads, win lots of fights just by having lovely combinations and stuff, and still not be a great tactician. But if you watch this fight, Demetrious Johnson's throwing punches, moving his head afterwards, looking lovely. Really important because he has a good few inches of extra distance to cover. You know, not only is he at a reach disadvantage, he's at a height disadvantage, so he's punching up when he goes in. So he's got some work to do to get close enough to hit Moraes. He's also got to get out without getting hit or kneed in the head, because, you know, not the knee to the head on the ground was the big one in the first fight, but a big uppercut put him there. But uppercuts and knees to the head, when you're that much shorter, they are a constant threat. Every time you get to the position you want where you're exchanging, you could always just get chinned with a knee, and that's like 10 times worse than the punches you've just landed on this guy's jaw. But in the first fight, I was kind of impressed with how Adriano Moraes limited the action on the feet. He kept the fight very long, open, out at distance, and threw lots of body kicks and high kicks to throw DJ off, or to punish him for being out at a severe distance. However, if you've watched Adriano Moraes' career in one, he does a lot of nothing. That's how I describe it. Some of these fights, you know, where they go to like the second, third round, there's not a lot happening. His striking is very basic when he goes to it, and then he'll just hit on something and guillotine someone or finish them. But, you know, his striking itself very rarely impresses. And I feel like he does better when he's sort of left alone. But if DJ came in with that plan to push up the pace and get in his face and land as many blows as possible, the man had to be salivating when Adriano Moraes missed weight and missed hydration. Or rather, when Matt Hume tested Adriano Moraes' weight and hydration and told DJ, always looking bad, you know, just if the guy's having a bad cut and your plan is to wear him down, that's good. But Moraes got him down very early on, And I thought one of the interesting things was Moraes' guard passing is very MMA. It's very George St. Pierre, BJ Penn. Not quite as technical as BJ Penn for reasons we'll get into. But you're in the guard, you hit them, they open their legs or they go to a butterfly guard or whatever. You step over one of their legs, you push it on the knee and you step over that knee and you pinch that knee. Well, you don't pinch the knee, but you force them into a half guard. And the thing with half guard, or a flattened half guard, which is always the distinction we're making, like knee shield half guard when the guy's on his side with a knee shield or a butterfly hook or whatever, is one thing, that's playing half guard. If you've got no knee shield or means of keeping distance and the guy's swallowed your knee, your bottom knee, you're not in half guard, you're getting smashed. So one of the things about half guard is, one, beat the top leg, which is the knee shield or the butterfly hook. 2, swallow the bottom knee between your legs. Or cover the top of it, is what they say. So, put your finger on the quad above your knee. That's the bit that needs to be covered to be, successfully forcing flattened half and passing people. And Moraes kept stepping over the knee, get in that position, and then he'd try and hit DJ and open his legs, and DJ's knee would slide back in again. DJ would be back to, effectively a full guard, not really a closed guard, both feet on the hips a lot of the time. The arm bars DJ was throwing up were very cool. This is another reason that I respect Matt Hume so much, but the submission sequences that DJ goes for, that stuff from Mounted Crucifix, the forearm arm bar in that sequence, all really slick and very well practiced, clearly. But these arm bars were so fast, they looked like the kind that Fedor used to do, which we sometimes call like a judo arm bar. So you got the opponent in your guard, you reach one hand, you control one wrist so that you've got an arm to attack with the armbar, and you reach the other hand between their legs, grab inside their thigh or their todge, and you pull your head towards that leg and whip your hips around. And you've seen Fedor do it a dozen times, but you get some real speed on it, which is contrasted with the jiu-jitsu armbar where you put your foot on the hip and you walk your way up. But he had his feet on the hips, and I was going back and watching it over and over again in slow-mo to see if he dived his hand between the legs. But he actually just threw his legs over without using his hand. It was really impressive. And he did it, and then Moraes would stand up or stack posture, and he'd try and get on the leg. But he ended up getting himself smashed in sort of like a leg drag a couple of times as a result of that, missing the leg. But what he was doing really well was landing lots of elbows while maintaining guard. Adriano Moraes kept putting his head in DJ's chest and trying to step over that knee, and DJ just kept elbowing him in the face. And he opened up some lovely cuts above his eyes, both eyes. And Moraes expended a ton of energy trying to smash this guy's guard. And a lot of the time he wasn't really in positions where he was making his weight felt. And that's another advantage of the sort of feet on the hips stuff and inside hooks, butterfly guard that DJ was doing a lot of. You're not feeling as much of the opponent's. If you go close guard with someone, you can hold them there for a while, but they can put some weight on you. They can stack up into you. They can punch you and stuff. If you've got something between you and them, a knee, your feet, whatever, it makes it a lot harder for them to put their weight on you. And obviously when you get your guard passed or you get smashed into a flat half, they are putting all their weight on you, which is not fun. But yeah, it was very impressive. Adriano Moraes had 2 rounds basically where he was on top trying to work, and all he got to show for it was a couple of cuts over his eyes and being gassed as fuck. Did hit DJ with a wicked high kick at one point that wobbled DJ, and DJ went to the fence, and he dragged him down, got a front headlock and kneed him in the head about four or 5 times, which was really not looking good for DJ. But he got wrist control on one hand, waited for Moraes to start trying to choke him, and then just bounced up to his feet, which was really nice. But the knockdown really closely linked with something he was doing all fight, and something that you see DJ do a lot. I mean, you saw it in the finish of the second Benavidez fight. Throws a load of kicks, then he does a little knee raise. Call it a fake teep, call it whatever you want. If you do it with the front leg, obviously that's very common in kickboxing and Muay Thai. John Haggerty has made an entire career out of that. He teeps a guy a few times with his lead leg, then he picks his lead leg up, they brace for the teep, or they reach down for the teep sometimes, and he just glides in, steps in front of them, close enough to hit him with that downward elbow or a 1-2. That Japanese lad he bashed the other month, he just kept picking up his lead leg and then coming in with a jab and an overhand behind it. But what DJ does is pick up his rear leg and step through with it, which he does. He does a lot of shifting and stance switching, which was really giving Moraes fits in this one. What I really like about what he does, so against Benavidez, he picked up his right leg as Benavidez' back was to the fence, picked up his right leg, came in and just stepped down, hit him with I think it was a left hook from southpaw in the head, or the other way around. But yeah, he does it a lot. And what I really liked in this one was I talked about him moving his head all the time, even though he does the chin whip thing, he does move his head quite a lot compared to the average fighter. But in this finishing sequence, he'd done it like several times throughout this fight, but he picked up the knee, then Moraes came back on him and he put his knee down and ducked under it and then came over with the top with a punch with his chin in the air. But stun Moraes goes back to the fence. DJ runs up and knees him in the head as he's dropping. Gets the perfect walk-away knockout, gets the win, gets his revenge, and then does the DJ move when he loses a fight, says he's not going to take a rematch. So he got out of the Henry Cejudo one. No, he said he's going up to... well, he's bantamweight now, isn't he? Or is this flyweight? Fuck. He said he's going to go up to bantamweight again because of his health or something like that, but he's not the one failing hydration tests. No, really happy for him. It was a chance for people to celebrate him online, which was really nice. I don't think anyone's kidding themselves that he's at the top of the game anymore, but Moraes is a hard guy, and he had a lot of physical advantages over DJ, which last time he used very well, and this time DJ almost brought them to lever against him, because he has that enormous weight cut, and DJ said, no, I'm going to get in your face, mate. You want to be left alone and work at a gentle pace. I'm going to put myself in uppercutting and kneeing distance, and I'm going to keep doing it and tire you out. Or when I'm on the bottom, I'm going to tire you out there. It's a really impressive... It actually shades of Frank Shamrock versus Tito Ortiz, a fight that you never hear about nowadays because the UFC fell out with Frank Shamrock. But Frank Shamrock knew he'd get taken down, so he worked on just tiring Tito out from his own guard and hitting him with elbows and things from there. And then wouldn't you know it, in the third or fourth, Tito's completely gassed. Frank can get back to his feet and just hammers him with his elbows and a hammer fist. But Tito's just desperately on a leg, sliding down towards the mat, and John McCarthy steps in and stops it. Which was as much Tito beating Tito as it was Frank beating Tito. But Frank came up with the game plan to make it happen and executed it. It's firing second in a duel. Once the other guy's fired and you're just standing there going, well, now I have time to aim. And Jesus H. Christ, that's what happens when I don't vent my chat on a boycast. I've been recording for almost an hour and we've only talked about one. This Contender Series wasn't amazing. Lots of quick finishes, which, of course, if you're watching the Contender Series, you're either a degenerate gambler or you want quick finishes. That's the whole marketing thing. Just want to say, funniest thing about the Contender Series, it's all Emperor Dana White wants a quick finish. He wants blood immediately or you're not getting signed. Unless you're a woman and then you turned up and you won. Well done. Welcome aboard. Everyone here gets a contract. All four dudes finished impressively or very quickly. And Victoria Dudakova, fair play to her. She fought through a knee injury, but at no point were you like, damn, she's going to get the stoppage or she's looking amazing here. It was just a standard women's strawweight fight, but gets the contract nonetheless. This is supposed to be the anti-woke company, man. I loved that when Tony Kelly was being a dickhead and the UFC were like, we don't fire people. We're not woke. And you're like, you literally did with Miguel Torres. He made someone called it literally a Always Sunny level rape joke, and they fired him. And now they're doing affirmative action if you're a woman, and particularly if you're a heavier woman. They're running a talented at every weight campaign. Anyway, what was good on this? Blake Builder versus Alex Morgan. Man, Alex Morgan looked very wooden. It's another one of those things where, damn, lovely mechanics, but very rote. No, every time the guy stepped in, he was like, I'm going to pump this jab now. And Blake Builder timed a lovely right hand across the top, made him stumble and ran around to his back, which is something you occasionally see. There was a great one in a random Shuto event years ago. Guy hit a flying knee on his opponent, and as he came down and the opponent sort of stumbled, he jumped on his back. Dudakova beat Silva after blowing her knee up. Rebecca versus Lidio was mental because Lidio was a giant, but had no... how do you fight out of Brazil and not have any ground game whatsoever? Looked absolutely clueless once he hit the mat. Now, I get that Rebecca's good, but Lydia's doing things like he reached between Rebecca's legs and started turning into him. And then Rebecca just grabbed his neck and got a rear naked choke from basically on the side, which isn't down to him being magic. That's down to Lydia just being bizarre. Tying up his own hands, turning into the guy and giving him the neck. Not even... There's turtling and getting caught out doing it. And then there's giving the guy your neck before you even turtle. Just bizarre behaviour from Lydia. Cedric's Dumas spazzed out on a guy and caught him with a guillotine in the first minute. And then Yusaka, Kinoshita, and Jose Henrique had an interesting fight where Kinoshita was having to contend with his big reach disadvantage and the guy splaying his fingers at his eyes every time he came in. Was doing like sort of an imitation Tyson thing, that's sort of weaving your head side to side while stepping left and right, doing a little double side step as you go in. Go watch Tyson on the pads with, was it Kevin Rooney? That footage that's in every highlight where he's coming across the ring very, very quickly. He was trying to do that. And yeah, he got in and then he didn't really do anything when he was in. But the counter was lovely. Enrique threw a right hand at him. He slipped to the outside of it and came over the top with the left hand. Beautiful. So they all win the chance of getting 20k if they win their UFC level fight next time. Yeah. Let's talk about this upcoming event then. So we're in Paris at the Accor Arena. It's Ciryl Gane versus Tai Tuivasa. It's the best of the rest at heavyweight. You got Ngannou, I suppose Blades, Aspinall. Then Gane and Tuivasa. Ciryl Gane coming back for the first time since losing the title shot, rather, since losing in a title fight to Francis Ngannou back at UFC 270. Not a bad performance. Just not enough, ultimately. Francis Ngannou had one of those of his own a little while before he won the belt. Meanwhile, Tai Tuivasa on it. Is it 4 he's on now? No, 5 win streak going back to Stefan Struve. Before that, getting scarf-holded like a women's MMA fight against Sergey Spivak. Someone was having a go about like analysts laughing about Tuivasa losing to Spivak. And if you didn't laugh about that, you don't know shit about MMA. But, these wins, Struve in 2020, I mean, who knew Struve was still fighting then? Because he got a heart defect discovered in like 2016 and had to retire. Harry Hunsucker, sadly cut just yesterday. And Greg Hardy, absolute bum. But at least, decently physically gifted. Augusto Sakai, a bit more impressive as a win, knocked him out in the second round. And Derek Lewis, sad to say, but probably the best win on that record. Not a bad performance against Derek Lewis, put him against the fence, beat him up. Honestly, some of the smartest work I've seen Ty do since I was sort of impressed in his debut against Rashad Coulter. I think that's like the Fights Gone By podcast, episode 30 or something like that. We talked about this exciting Ty Tuivasa. I like what he's doing. He's got the nice elbow, the right low kick, double hands under the jaw and escape when put to the fence. And then he lost to Junior Dos Santos, who was already washed. People like him. He wins fights in entertaining ways, and he does a shoey afterwards, which it is like if Derek Lewis never got past My Balls Was Hot, but the people seem to like it. So go on then. Matchup. I suppose Ciryl Gane's going to try and fight out a distance and use low kicks and front kicks to the body, with the odd poking left straight or whatever. And Tai Tuivasa is going to try and get him to the fence and beat him up. Really, what you're going to see is Tai Tuivasa's footwork. Can he get his man in position to do bad things to him? Derek Lewis always goes to the fence and stands there with his legs locked and his lead foot pointed in. So if you can, or if you're looking for that, it's doable. You do have to take some shots, or at least duck some shots to do it, and which is why only elite heavyweights do. But Ciryl Gane typically much better at staying off the fence, which is problematic if you've got a significantly shorter reach, as Tai Tuivasa does, and you're relying on getting in and landing big shots like a straight right or a right elbow against a guy who really just wants to float around and kick for the most part. Interested to see how the clinch works out. Obviously, Gane goes to the clinch, uses his own takedowns and things, but was out-wrestled by Francis Ngannou in his last one. A possibly no knee tendons Francis Ngannou, no less. Whereas Tai Tuivasa, you don't really see him taking people down. So I could see Ciryl Gane, if he really wanted to take the danger out of this, kick at range for the first round, or most of the first round, clinch up when Tuivasa steps in, and try and trip him to the mat and tire him out. For Tuivasa, like I said, try and get him to the fence. And the other thing is that, the clinch, I don't think there's anything that says that has to be a one-way fight. Mark Hunt used to do quite decently. Normally when people clinched up with him first, but he did it to JDS a couple of times. If you're the big banger, initiate a clinch with one underhook or both underhooks, push them to the fence, get your head under theirs or your hands under their chin, limp your arms out, and then start swinging along the fence. I don't think that's a bad strategy for Tuivasa here, if he can enter on a clinch. Because the thing is that, fighting isn't sumo. Guys will not get an over-under clinch with you and push into you to try and stop you pushing them to the fence. They'll normally just go to the fence and try and fight you off there, to prevent you from taking them down, or to use the back to, the fence against their back to keep themselves up. So if you grab a clinch with someone and you start walking to the fence, they will probably, provided you don't overdo it and walk onto like a Sasai or Komiyashi sweep, they'll normally just give ground and go to the fence. Not a bad position to start swinging if you know how to free your hands, which is something that I know Tuivasa does know how to do. I could see Ciryl Gane beating up his body and finishing with something like knees from a double collar tie. Can't really see Ciryl Gane knocking him out with punches because that's not really Ciryl Gane's game. As we always say, Ciryl Gane gets into trouble when he starts swinging wide, trying to hurt people. He does better when he's just poking at people and floating around. As in, he does more damage when he's poking at people and floating around. When he tries to swing at people, he becomes much more hittable without noticeable increase in power. So we're in Paris. Ciryl Gane should win, but because we're in Paris, good chance Ciryl Gane doesn't, because that tends to be how it works. Co-main event, Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori. Like it, Robert Whittaker obviously coming off a very close competitive fight against Ciryl Adesanya. Basically, one that some people scored him winning, to be honest, but an announcement that that first fight was because of his bad decision making. It isn't the case that he's just levels below Ciryl Adesanya, and he's been knocking off contenders forever. Darren Till not a contender. Well, actually, Darren Till was coming off that really good win over Kelvin Gastelum, but Darren Till, Jared Cannonier, who just went to a uneventful decision with Adesanya himself, and then Gastelum, who isn't really a contender, but he's just been lining them up and knocking them down. Marvin Vettori, pretty strong record in his own right. Carl Robertson not so strong, but the Jack Hermansson one was very impressive. Just beat Paulo Costa. Had his own unsuccessful shot at Ciryl Adesanya due to his own daft decisions. Double jab and try and take him down with a locked hands double along the fence that you're never going to achieve over and over again. The thing here is probably the speed. Robert Whittaker very fast on the in and out. Does get clipped later in fights, but Marvin Vettori not a hitter. Stood up to Paulo Costa, had a good slugfest with him, got Jack Hermansson pretty tentative and scared looking in a lot of those exchanges, but not knocking anyone out. It's never been his game. In recent years, he's been surprising people more with the wrestling, but taking down Robert Whittaker, that's the one thing that I've always celebrated so much about Robert Whittaker. Very hard to take down, even harder to keep down. Just, if you watch those fights with Yoel Romero and Jacare going hell for leather in the early going because that's what he does. He's not got great technical wrestling, so he tries to dive on your legs and just get you down in the first round. Otherwise, he's screwed. But Yoel Romero, tried to take him down several times, couldn't over the course of their two fights. When he did get him down, Robert Whittaker was all sit-outs and turning back in, used grapevines from the closed guard and an underhook to get to butterfly guard and sweep up to his feet again. Just brilliant work all round. So it could be really interesting if they start grappling, what Marvin can do. Always interested. I could see Marvin, if he's losing the speed battle on the feet, I could see him working his way towards the fence, because he can do that. He's proved it against Ciryl Adesanya. He can get the fight to the fence. He can cut the ring decently against a guy who's pretty hard to trap along the fence. And then finishing the takedowns from there was his big issue. I could see him trying to lean on Robert Whittaker, or, attempted takedowns on the fence. If you can keep him up for the full 3 rounds, that's you on offense the entire time, even if you haven't got him down. Let's not forget Jose Aldo just lost a fight where he stopped 15 out of 16 takedowns, which is incredible, but doesn't score. So, it's I could see him smothering Robert Whittaker in a less than eventful fight. Clinch striking would be a good place for him to try and get the better of Whittaker, but never really been a huge part of his game. So that's the other good fight on this card. There's a couple of low-key could-be bangers. Nasrat Haqparast versus John McDacey. Haqparast's not an old guy. McDacey is, what is he, like 39, 40 now? And he's racking up the injuries. They were supposed to do this in February, and they delayed it because of a McDacey injury. But Haqparast, hilarious just for the overhand, where he does the John L. Sullivan, like his left hand slaps the inside of his left thigh when he's throwing his overhand. Leans forward at the waist to do it. Could give McDacey trouble. I mean, he's a big hitter. When he does work in combination, it's quite good, but he tends to eschew that in favour of just throwing the one big swing. McDacey, pioneer of weird taekwondo bollocks in the UFC. The low-key banger on this card is Charles Jourdain versus Nathaniel Wood. Charles Jourdain coming off a fun fight against Shane Burgos, where he lost the majority decision, not even split decision. Real close stuff. Spent a lot of the fight backing up and on the fence and just looking worse to judges. He was doing good landing his own strikes in the later going. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Wood had that banger against Charles Rosa. I don't rate Charles Rosa especially highly, but Nathaniel Wood looks so fast and crisp and slick in that fight. A little bit of everything. And in the past, I've criticised Nathaniel Wood for getting a little bit one note in his striking, like he loves the shifting right hand. I mean, that was a Demetrious Johnson one you saw on full display against Adriano Moraes. But that was a really varied performance. Up and down, every level of the body. Used his hands and his legs and his knees and his elbows. He looked great. Only downside, I think he even hit a couple of takedowns in that one, but the only downside is that was his first one up at bantamweight. Sorry, featherweight. He's from bantamweight. He did look small against Rosa. He looked smaller than Rosa. If he starts meeting people who... Well, I mean, Charles Jourdain's not small as a featherweight, but if you met someone like a Julian Erosa or a Yair Rodriguez or someone like that, size is a big thing in fights. More so when you're going to wrestle. But then I'm quite interested in the Nathaniel Wood bantamweight run because he's a speedy striker. And in recent years, we've found that big weight cuts tend to help wrestlers because they're big and strong. They're stronger than their opposition when they're fighting people who've also done a weight cut to that weight or whatever. The bigger the weight cut you can achieve, the more you benefit from that advantage of size. But for strikers, it seems to be that if you go up, you're giving yourself more work to do in the wrestling, but you can win it on conditioning and the speed and the speed of your striking and ability to take a shot. A lot of guys have found that when they don't drain themselves, they can take much harder punches much more easily and outlast their opponents. So in terms of, it's an interesting thing because you'd think if you're struggling with wrestlers going up a weight class, you're going, well, they're going to be even bigger and even stronger. But it seems like the cardio edge you get and the speed edge you get helps a lot of fighters. Or the cardio edge and speed edge you can get. Because, again, some guys just... I mean, they think of Darren Till. He just eats whatever he wants. Like his going to middleweight is just an excuse to eat crap, according to his coaches. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And then the other low-key banger, possibly, because it's middleweight, and I don't like touting middleweight fights, but Imavov versus Buckley. Buckley always game. Basically wants to be the Mike Tyson of the UFC. Actually, we were talking about that. What was his name? The Japanese lad on the Contender Series using that side-to-side stepping in like Tyson used to. You'll see Buckley do that from time to time. Imavov, great kicks, decent punches, decent wrestling. Another one out of, what's his name? Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane's coach. He's his new favourite guy at that gym. So, always interesting to watch him come up. That's about it for good stuff from that card. I think we'll call it there for today. If you want to sign up to Patreon, get the boycasts that usually come out, but this week get the Alex Pereira Advanced Striking 2.0. Do that, support the podcast, be a boy. If you want to read what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com, and if you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. I will be back on Monday for Jack Slack Podcast episode 100. Dana White is going to be joining us to celebrate. No, he's not. But we'll do something. We'll do a look back at all my best burns on random fighters who didn't fight very well. It'll just be a normal podcast. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Benoit Saint-Denis. I'm so in love with you. Bless.